I heard my own name echo like a sentence already carved in stone. Mara Ellison, deemed an unfit mother. The words slammed against the dark wood panels of the Charleston courtroom like chains locking around my life. I sat frozen, my hands cold against the table, while the man who once slept beside me for 8 years, Dorian Ellison, stood there, detached, like he was closing out a business transaction. No glance, no remorse, not a flicker of humanity. His attorney, Mr. Grayson, continued with a voice polished enough to cut glass. Your Honor, we request full possession of all assets, sole custody of minor Lana Ellison, and complete removal of the defendant's parental rights. I swallowed hard. Not because of the house, not because of the reputation, but because I was about to lose my daughter. The judge flipped to the final page, the gavel lifted. I knew what was coming. I had tried to be strong. I had tried to stay composed. I had tried to believe that truth would eventually be seen. But when the judge's stern eyes lowered toward me and his lips parted, I knew I had lost. Based on the evidence presented, and then everything stopped. Not because I objected, not because my attorney spoke, but because a small, trembling voice rose from the back of the courtroom. Your Honor, wait. No one turned right away, but the air shifted, like a strange wind had slipped through the sealed room. Then came footsteps, small ones, one after another, beating in time with my heart. Everyone turned at once. Lana. She stood there, in her private school uniform, one white sock slightly crooked, her backpack hanging off one shoulder. There was still a smudge of ink on her cheek from art class. I had never seen her look so little. Dorian shot up, panic cracking his voice for the first time all morning. Lana, you need to leave, now! But Lana didn't look at him. She looked straight at the judge, with eyes I once believed were too young to understand the world. Your Honor, can I show you something? Something my mommy doesn't know? The sentence dropped into the room like a stone into still water, sending ripples through every breath in the space. The judge lowered the gavel, but didn't strike. He leaned forward. Do you have something to present? Lana nodded, a tiny nod, but steady. She stepped forward, and that's when I saw what she was holding. A cracked old tablet, scratched edges, the one I thought had been replaced by the new device Dorian bragged about, the one he claimed was better for her development. I didn't understand. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook beneath the table. Dorian lunged forward, voice fractured. Your Honor, I object! The judge lifted a hand, cutting him off. No emotion, no hesitation. Let the child speak. The courtroom fell into a silence so deep, I could hear the faint metallic clink from the handcuffs on a deputy near the door. Lana stood in the center of the courtroom, lifting a tablet with both small hands, as if it were the heaviest thing she had ever carried. I want everyone to see this. Her fingertip touched the screen, and as the video began to load, I felt something terrible was about to be exposed. No one moved, and in that moment, I understood. There are some truths that don't need a mother to speak them, because they are revealed by the very child they tried to take away from her. If you're watching and following along with this story, tell me which state or city you're watching from. It really helps YouTube recommend these stories to more people who enjoy them. And if you want to know what happens next, tap like. It only takes a second, but it truly helps the story reach others. The large screen mounted on the courtroom wall lit up the moment Lana pressed play. The first frame was shaky, slightly tilted, as if filmed from a hidden corner behind a potted plant in the living room of my own home. I recognized it instantly. The beige rug, the brown leather armchair, the glass doors overlooking Charleston Bay. That's our house, I whispered, my voice scraped thin. No one responded, but I could feel every gaze shifting toward the screen, and then toward me. Then 2 figures appeared in the frame. Dorian and a woman, not the polished version in a blazer like she had worn at court the week before. Not the composed demeanor of a licensed therapist like she claimed to be, but Valerie, hair down, wearing a champagne silk blouse, entering my home with a key only Dorian and I should have had. A sharp inhale came from someone behind me. I couldn't move, couldn't shut my eyes, couldn't look away. Dorian stepped toward her, wrapped an arm around her waist, and kissed her neck. Right where mine once was. Attorney Grayson went pale. The judge stopped writing, and Dorian shot to his feet.
Your Honor, turn that off! This video is illegal!
But his voice trembled, nothing like the confident man who stood in court that morning. The judge raised one hand.
Sit down, Mr. Ellison. The video will be viewed in full.
A deputy blocked Dorian's path. He froze, as if doused in ice water. Then the sound in the video came through, so clear it felt like it was happening inside the room. Valerie's voice, soft but dripping with contempt. Are you sure the plan will work? Your wife, she seems a little dumb and pitiful. Dorian laughed, a quiet sound, but more corrosive than acid.
Dumb is good.
She believes everything. The money is already in your account, babe. My hand flew to my mouth, not to stop myself from crying, but to keep from vomiting. My attorney, Mr. Whitaker, leaned toward me. Stay calm. Let them burn themselves. The video continued. Valerie sat on the sofa, the same sofa where I used to read bedtime stories to Lana. I'm still worried about my testimony, she said, twirling her hair, rehearsing like an actress. What if her lawyer questions me? Dorian waved it off, smug and certain. I've prepared. Last week, I recorded her crying like she was losing her mind. I'll provoke her again in court, make her snap. Then the judge will believe you, the credible psychological expert. It felt like someone reached inside my chest with bare hands and ripped my heart out. Every moment I had endured, the suspicious glances, the cold questions, the accusations that I was unstable, the tears I forced myself to swallow so I wouldn't look hysterical. All of it had been engineered. In the video, Dorian continued, slower, colder. Once I get custody of Lana, we'll sell this house and move to Seattle. She'll have nothing. No money, no child. Someone gasped, "Oh my God!" But I didn't turn. I only looked at Lana. She stood beside the court clerk, her eyes fixed on the screen. But my heart knew she had listened to this alone before deciding to bring it here. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal of my husband or the fact that my child had carried the truth in silence to protect me. On the plaintiff's bench, Valerie slid down in her seat, hands covering her face, mascara streaked black down her cheeks. Attorney Grayson dropped his head, shuffling papers in panic, searching for an exit that didn't exist. And Dorian, he looked around like a drowning man. No arrogance, no composure, no mask, only fear. The video ended with a soft click, Lana powering it off. The room held its breath for 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. Then the judge stood. His voice was low, each word cutting through the air. This courtroom has seen enough. We are no longer discussing divorce or custody. We are now addressing conspiracy to defraud, asset theft, perjury, and the manipulation of a minor. Dorian stammered.
Your Honor, Silence!
The gavel struck, so hard Lana flinched. I reached out instinctively, and she ran into my arms, holding on to me in front of everyone. For the first time since the darkness began, I felt warmth, not from a home, not from a marriage, but from the child they said I was unfit to raise. The judge turned toward us. Effective immediately, Lana will remain with her mother, and this court will initiate a formal investigation into Mr. Ellison and the woman seen in the video. I heard other people exhale. I heard the clink of handcuffs. I heard the steady steps of officers approaching, but the sound I heard clearest was Lana whispering into my ear. I knew you weren't bad. I had to show them. I held her tighter. The officers stepped forward, the static from their radios crackling into the heavy air. 2 of them positioned themselves on either side of Dorian, hands resting on their cuffs, waiting for the order. The judge looked directly at him. Mr. Ellison, stand up. Dorian didn't move. His eyes darted between the judge, his attorney, and the dark screen, as if hoping the video had been a hallucination. The judge repeated, his voice dropping lower, sharp as a blade. Stand up. Finally, Dorian rose, but his legs shook so hard I heard the metal chair scrape across the marble floor. Valerie, several rows away, clutched the edge of her seat like someone being dragged off a cliff. She stared at Dorian with wild panic, no trace left of the seductive confidence or the sly authority of the psychologist she pretended to be. The judge spoke again, every word landing with weight.
Mr.
Ellison and Miss Valerie, this court orders both of you into immediate custody pending investigation for financial fraud, illegal fund transfers, fabrication of evidence, and deliberate manipulation of a minor witness. A sharp click rang out as the first cuff locked around Dorian's wrist. Not the sound of pain, the sound of a collapsing scheme. He tried to turn toward Lana. "Honey, don't." But Lana pressed herself tighter against me, and that was the first time I saw total defeat in his eyes, the look of a man realizing that the child he treated like a tool was the one who destroyed him. Valerie thrashed as the officers grabbed her.
"No, you're arresting the wrong person. I didn't know anything. He forced me."
But then Dorian shouted, voice cracking apart.
You're lying! The whole plan was yours!
Two people who once whispered together, touched lips, split money, and dismantled my dignity, now tearing into each other like cornered animals. No one pitied them, not a single person. Even Attorney Grayson stepped back, removed his glasses, and scrubbed his face, as if trying to erase his association with them. As the officers escorted the two out of the courtroom, the judge turned to me and Lana, his voice softened, not sentimental, but steady like aged wood. "Mrs. Ellison, from this moment forward, you have full custodial rights. You and your daughter will leave this building under protection." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, not with tears, but with the realization that I no longer had to hold my breath. For the first time in months, I inhaled fully. Attorney Whitaker stood beside me, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. "I told you. Justice is late, but when it arrives, it knocks very hard." Lana looked up at me, her eyes shimmering but unafraid.
"Mommy, can we go home now?"
I pulled her close, my cheek against her hair, the smell of sun, childhood sweat, and peace. "Yes, we're going home." But the home I meant was not the mansion where I tiptoed like a shadow, where I believed cooking better, cleaning harder, speaking softer might make my husband love me again. No, home now meant freedom, a place where I wasn't called a failure, a place without a manipulative man, a place where Lana could sleep without clutching a tablet like a shield. We walked into the courthouse hallway. People watched, whispered, speculated. But this time, I didn't lower my head. A reporter appeared, microphone raised.
Mrs. Ellison, do you have any comment?
I paused, not to answer, but because Lana squeezed my hand, telling me to keep walking. I smiled, not a victorious smile, a survivor's smile. We stepped out onto the courthouse steps. The Charleston wind lifted my hair, carrying the salt from the harbor, something I had been too exhausted to feel for so long. Lana leaned her head against my shoulder.
"Mommy?"
"Yes, sweetheart?"
"I was scared."
"But I knew you wouldn't leave me." I closed my eyes. No speech needed, no bold statement, just one sentence. Enough to rewrite the meaning of motherhood they tried to tear apart. "I will never leave you. Not ever." In the distance, police sirens wailed, carrying away the two people who once believed they were in control. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past carried itself away. That night, the small temporary apartment where Lana and I were staying settled into a strange kind of quiet. Not the heavy quiet that crushed my lungs in the final months before the trial. Not the silence of fear, of waiting, of a man's footsteps coming down the stairs and a cold voice judging every breath. But the quiet of a place no longer being watched. I switched on the kitchen light. A soft amber glow spread outward, touching the mug of warm cocoa I was stirring. Lana sat at the table, legs dangling, arms wrapped around her knees. I set the cup in front of her. "Do you want marshmallows?" She nodded, but didn't speak. Not because she was sad, but because something was forming in her mind. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I felt both weightless and hollow, like someone who had escaped a drowning night but wasn't yet used to the brightness of morning. After a while, Lana lifted her head. "Mommy." I took her hand. "Yes, sweetheart, tell me." She looked toward the window where the harbor beacons blinked like old stories being retold across the water. I didn't tell you about the video because I was scared. I froze, scared, a word that hurt more than any insult Dorian had ever thrown at me. Scared of me, honey? Lana shook her head quickly. No, scared that if I said anything, Daddy would leave me behind and take you away. I heard the sound of my own heart breaking, not because she was wrong, but because a 7-year-old had carried a secret just to keep her mother from being taken. I scooted closer and wrapped my arms around her. You never have to be scared like that again. No one can take me away from you. No one. But Lana wasn't finished. There's another reason. I brushed her hair back gently. Tell me. She reached into her little backpack and pulled out the old tablet. The cracked screen looked like lightning frozen across a night sky. I kept this because it felt like a tiny window. I wanted to make sure that if Daddy lied to you, I would have proof. My breath caught. She said it with the voice of someone far older than she was. And suddenly memories sharpened. The nights she watched Dorian whisper into his phone. The times he told her, "Don't upset your mother more." The surprise gifts. The shiny new tablet. The things he said about me right in front of her. I once believed she was too young to understand. But I had underestimated my child and overestimated the man who hurt us. Lana leaned against my arm. I don't like the old house anymore, Mommy. It smells sad. I let out a small laugh, part tender, part bitter. Yeah, I think so too. She thought for a moment, then asked, "Where do we live now?" I looked around the little apartment. White walls, thin curtains, a plain sofa, 2 toothbrushes side by side in the bathroom. Not luxurious, not large. Not full of the things Dorian used to boast about to prove his worth, but it had something the old house never did. Peace. We'll start here, I said. Then we'll find a place with morning sunlight. And a spot where you can plant flowers. Lana's eyes lit up, not because of the house, but because of the future. After a while, she grew sleepy. I tucked her into bed, pulled the blanket up, and turned off the light. But as I stepped away, she called softly. "Mommy?" I stood at the doorway. "Yes, baby?" "Tomorrow, will you still be here?" No question in my life had ever stopped my heart like that one. I went back, sat beside her, and placed my hand on her small head. Tomorrow I'll be here. The day after, I'll be here. And all the days after that, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. Lana closed her eyes, not from exhaustion, but from safety. I watched her for a long moment before stepping out. The door closed, leaving behind a darkness that wasn't frightening anymore. In the living room, my phone buzzed. A message from Attorney Whitaker. "The press will report tomorrow. You should be prepared." After reading it, I looked out the window. Under the streetlights, the water along the harbor rippled softly. I didn't tremble. I didn't fear what people would think. I didn't dread rumors, whispers, or judgment, because the truth no longer belonged to someone else. I turned off the light, sank into the sofa, and pulled a thin blanket over my legs. And for the first time in the longest stretch of my life, I fell asleep without hearing a door lock, a man's sigh, or the slam of a wooden table meant to remind me that I was a failure. The next morning, I woke not to the sound of a slamming door, a glass hitting the sink, or Dorian's footsteps on the stairs, but to the smell of pancakes I was cooking for Lana. Charleston sunlight slipped through the curtains, landing across the small kitchen, turning the melting butter into a rare moment of peace. Lana ran in with messy hair and bare feet tapping the wooden floor, her voice bubbling. "Mommy, I'm not scared to wake up anymore." That sentence stung my eyes more than yesterday's overturned verdict. We were just starting breakfast when my phone rang. Not once, but over and over like a hailstorm. Messages, emails, missed calls. My name was in every headline. Charleston divorce shocker, child's tablet video overturns court ruling. Businessman arrested, conspiracy exposed through secret footage. Fake therapist or criminal accomplice. I tried to scroll past them, but one line stopped me cold. Victim is a stay-at-home mother isolated for years. The word victim made me tremble, not from hurt, but because for the first time I wasn't being called unstable, selfish, a failure, the one who ruined the family. Lana watched me, a little worried. "Are you okay, Mommy?" I set the phone down and brushed her cheek with my thumb. "I'm okay. It's just, the world finally knows the truth." But if the world knew the truth, the world also knew my name. And I was right. Not 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I flinched, the reflex of someone who lived too long being monitored. But when I opened it, it wasn't Dorian, it wasn't Valerie. It was a woman in a civil investigation suit. "Mrs. Ellison, I'm Agent Monroe. I'm here to conduct intake statements for you and your daughter. The formal investigation has begun." I let her in. Lana sat beside me, holding my hand under the table like she feared I might disappear. Agent Monroe opened a thick file, her voice steady as granite. "We have seized Miss Ellison's email servers, traced financial transfers, and found evidence indicating the scheme lasted at least 12 months. We've also confirmed Valerie's credentials are real, but she violated ethical codes severely and is facing criminal charges." My stomach turned cold, like touching ice. A year. A year they prepared to destroy me. Not a moment of impulse, not a temporary mistake, a calculated operation. Agent Monroe continued. "But most importantly, your daughter's tablet is admissible evidence because it was recorded inside your own home. That is why we were able to proceed with arrests inside the courthouse." I looked at Lana, her eyes bright with understanding. But then Agent Monroe tilted her head and studied me. "There's something else I need to ask. Do you know who helped Lana bring the device into the courtroom?" I froze. "You mean, she didn't walk in alone?" Agent Monroe nodded. "Courthouse security protocol doesn't allow minors to enter unattended." Someone escorted her to the rear door and disappeared before staff saw them. I turned to Lana. "Sweetheart, who brought you?" Lana blinked. "I don't remember her name, but she's the one who helped you before, the one at the office when you were crying." I went still. Which office? Then I remembered. The day I was desperate, searching for the cheapest lawyer I could find, clutching the last $27 in my wallet. The day I sat outside Attorney Whitaker's office, shaking so hard I couldn't read the form. The day a young receptionist handed me tissues, a glass of water, and said, "Don't let anyone make you believe you're useless." I never knew her name, never thought she remembered me, never imagined she would appear at that exact moment. Agent Monroe closed the file. "There are witnesses, Mrs. Ellison, people who saw how you were treated before. Their statements will change the criminal trial ahead." My heart pounded. A criminal trial, not just divorce, not just custody, but restoration of dignity. Agent Monroe stood and handed me her card. "We'll be in touch soon, and don't worry. From now on, no one will get near you or your daughter." When she left, Lana and I stood at the door for a long moment. Outside, people walked by. The streetcar bell chimed at the corner. Life as ordinary as ever, as if the world didn't know we had crawled out of a pit the day before. Lana tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, if someone helped you once, does that mean more people might believe you too?" I knelt down, eye level with her. "Yes, and there's someone who believes me most of all." "Who?" "You." Lana smiled, a smile with no shadow in it. That afternoon, while Lana and I were washing dishes after a simple lunch, seared salmon and spinach salad, the phone began ringing again. Not once, not twice, but over and over, like a wave that refused to recede. I dried my hands and looked at the screen. A message from Attorney Whitaker. "Turn on the local news. Now." I grabbed the remote and switched to the Charleston channel. The first image made me freeze. A photo of me and Lana walking out of the courthouse hand in hand. And behind us, Dorian in handcuffs being escorted away. The anchor spoke in a grave tone. "A case rocking Charleston. Businessman Dorian Ellison arrested during his own divorce hearing after a video recorded on a 7-year-old's tablet exposed fraud, manipulation, and evidence tampering. I saw Lana look at me, eyes wide. The reporter continued. Public opinion is split. One side sympathizes with the mother who was isolated for years. The other questions, how could a 7-year-old record such a video alone? Then the screen shifted to footage of the old house, the one where I used to walk softly like a shadow. Sources say there may still be shared assets, equity holdings, and investment accounts that were concealed or transferred before the scheme unraveled. I set the remote down, my hand trembling slightly. I thought everything ended in court, but it wasn't an ending, only the beginning. Lana tugged at my sleeve. Mommy, are they saying bad things about you? I knelt down, facing her. They don't know the whole story, but the truth is on our side. Do you understand? She nodded, but I could see another question waiting behind her eyelashes. Just then, there was a knock at the door, not loud, not urgent, but gentle, like someone who didn't want to startle us. I opened it, and time seemed to slow. The receptionist, the woman who handed me tissues the day I trembled in the waiting room. The woman Lana said brought her to the back courthouse door. She held a cream-colored paper bag and gave a soft smile. I'm sorry to come without calling, but I thought you both needed this. I invited her in. Lana came out of her chair, recognizing her immediately. My name is Harper, she said, placing the bag on the table. I've worked at Whitaker's office for 3 years, and I witnessed your husband. I stiffened. You mean at the office? Harper nodded, her expression sharpening. 2 months ago, he came in. He didn't know I could hear him, but he was talking loudly on the phone, saying you were easy to control, had no friends, and would eventually collapse. It felt like someone opened an old door and let a cold draft in. Harper continued. I couldn't do anything then, but when I saw your name on the court docket and saw you come alone, I knew you had no one standing with you. When Lana came to find me, I understood immediately. I looked at Lana, my heart tightening and expanding at the same time. Harper opened the paper bag and pulled out a folder. You should see this. A former client at the firm once worked for Ellison Group. He left these documents behind when he moved out, and I happened to keep them. I opened the file. Inside were bank account ledgers, equity ownership lists, records of international investments, and most striking, a document titled Trust Asset, Secondary Beneficiary, Lana Ellison. I looked up, breath catching. Harper nodded. Yes, Dorian created the trust 3 years ago. Not out of love, but to avoid taxes and hide assets before divorce. But minor protection laws froze it, and now the trust belongs to Lana. Harper smiled gently. And you are the legal guardian. I sat down, feeling the floor shift beneath me. Not only had I escaped the verdict, not only had I kept my daughter, but I had reclaimed what he thought he would walk away with like a trophy. But Harper wasn't finished. There's one more thing, she said softly, glancing around as if someone might overhear. There's another witness, someone who knew about Dorian and Valerie long before anyone else. And he contacted me this morning. A chill went down my spine. Who? Harper answered slowly, each word landing like a stone. Valerie's ex-husband. The air in the room seemed to solidify. Lana clasped my hand. Harper stood. I'll arrange for you to meet him, and this time, you won't be fighting alone. She walked to the door, but before leaving, she turned back. You're not a victim, Mara. You're a survivor, and survivors deserve their lives back. The door closed. The apartment grew quiet again, but not the fragile kind of quiet anymore. Lana climbed into her chair and stared at the stack of documents. Mommy, does that mean we're not poor anymore? I pulled her into my arms, laughing through tears. No, sweetheart, we were never poor. We just had our rights taken from us. Outside the window, the afternoon light settled over the harbor, the water shimmering like molten metal. A new chapter was coming, and this time, I would be the one holding the pen. 2 days later, I arrived at a small cafe on the corner of Meeting Street, the place Harper said I would meet the person I needed to meet. The cafe was quiet, old brick walls, ceiling fans turning slowly, no whispering judgment, no eyes measuring my worth. Just the smell of roasted coffee and buttered pastries. I chose a table in the corner, my back to the wall, a habit formed during the last months with Dorian, as if I needed to see the exit to be sure I wouldn't be trapped again. 5 minutes later, a man walked in. Tall, slightly lean, dark brown hair, a face worn by someone who had seen too much and hadn't been believed. When his eyes met mine, he gave a small nod, like confirming that a shared truth existed between us, even if no one else knew it. "You're Mara?" he asked. "I'm the one you came to see," I replied. He sat, fingers interlaced. No introduction needed, no circling around it. "I'm Evan Carter, Valerie's ex-husband." The air around the table shifted, as if the little room closed out every sound that wasn't part of this conversation. He looked out the window for a long moment, then said, "I watched the news. When I saw the video, I knew it was time to speak." I didn't interrupt. I let him talk. Let the story pour out like water pressing against a broken dam. "Valerie wasn't a victim of Dorian," he said, voice low but steady. "She's done this with other men before. I was one of the ones she destroyed." My body tensed, every word adding weight to my ribs. 2 years ago, he continued, she created another version of reality. She recorded me during an argument about her draining my savings. She edited the recording to make it sound like I threatened her. In court, she cried, shook, said I was emotionally abusive. A cold line ran down my spine. The court believed her. Evan said, eyes glassy but dry. I lost my house, my reputation, custody of my son. I placed my hand on the table, not touching him, but close enough for him to feel I was listening, believing. "And then," he said, "a year ago, I saw Valerie with Dorian. They thought no one recognized them, but I did. She has a very specific way of smiling when she's manipulating someone." The pulse in my throat thudded hard. Evan leaned in. "And this is why I contacted Harper. I have something." He reached into his jacket and placed a small silver USB drive on the table, like evidence being submitted in a courtroom. "I have a recording. Valerie admitting to a friend that she staged everything in our case and that she found a new, lucrative target, a wealthy, married man who was easy to control." I exhaled sharply, almost losing my breath. "Dorian," I whispered. Evan nodded slowly. "She targeted him. She knew he was perfect for it. But when I saw the news, I realized you were the one who deserved to be cleared first." The words made me lean back, not in shock, but because after months of being called unstable, selfish, unfit, his sentence felt like warm air filling my lungs. "What do you want from me?" I asked, not suspicious, but as someone who had been used before. Evan shook his head. "I don't want anything. I just don't want anyone else becoming me. I don't want your daughter growing up with the wound my son carries." I looked at him, longer than necessary, then I nodded. "I'll give this to the investigators," I said. Evan tightened his hands. "Yes, but before you do, there's more." He opened his wallet and pulled out a business card. "This is the lawyer who helped restore my name after 3 years. He's the only attorney I know who isn't afraid to go after the system and false professionals." I took the card, dark blue border, clean lettering. Samuel Reed, attorney for ethical violations and reputation restoration. The name felt like a door opening onto a road I hadn't dared imagine. As Evan stood to leave, I asked, "Do you regret loving her?" He paused, hand resting on the back of the chair. "I don't regret loving," he said. "I only regret stopping loving myself long enough for her to destroy me." Then he walked out, the door closing softly behind him. I sat there, in front of me, the USB, the card, and something new. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was beginning to win. When I returned to the apartment, Lana ran to me as if I had been gone for days.
"Mommy, I made a drawing of a hero at school today."
I smiled. "Who did you draw?" Lana beamed.
"I drew you."
I held her, and for the first time in my life, I believed it was true. 3 days after meeting Evan, I walked into the blue glass office tower on Broad Street, where attorney Samuel Reed worked. Lana held my hand, her eyes following the stone patterns on the floor like she was stepping into a different kind of world. The reception area was quiet, no printer humming, no judgmental glances, no heavy sighs of doubt. Only the ticking of a wall clock, each beat steady like a heartbeat returning to its natural rhythm. A man stepped out of the conference room, tall, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes but not cold. He reached out his hand. "You must be Mara Ellison. I've been expecting you." His voice was low, measured, the kind that makes a person feel heard before they even speak. I sat down. Lana sat beside me, legs swinging, silent, as if she understood this moment belonged to both of us. Samuel opened a folder. Inside were photos of me at the courthouse, news reports, and the USB Evan had given me. "I've listened to the recording," Samuel said, leaning back. "This case isn't just about protecting you. It's a textbook example of manipulation, fabricated evidence, and exploitation of the legal system." I swallowed. "Do you think I can get my name back?" Samuel looked straight at me. "Not just get it back. Force the system to publicly acknowledge they were wrong about you." My chest lifted, a sensation I had never felt before. Not vague hope, but certainty rooted in something real. Samuel continued. "A special hearing will take place in 1 week. You will appear as the harmed party, the mother who was defamed, and the primary witness. But most importantly, you must appear as yourself." I hesitated. "You mean, not crying? Not shaking?" Samuel shook his head. "No, I want you real. No acting, no performing strength. Your emotions are the strongest refutation, because truth doesn't tremble under light." I didn't know how to respond, but Lana answered for me. "Mommy doesn't have to pretend to be strong. Mommy is already strong." Samuel smiled at her. "And you too, Lana. You are the one witness they cannot manipulate." Lana lifted her chin, proud like she'd won a medal. That evening, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in the small apartment, not to fix my hair, not to check makeup like the days Dorian insisted I look presentable. I looked at myself, eyes with a faint shadow, mouth soft but not collapsed, shoulders no longer tucked inward waiting to be scolded. I looked at that reflection and realized I was no longer the woman who spoke softly to keep the peace, no longer the wife judged for a slightly bitter cup of coffee, no longer the mother painted unstable through staged evidence. I was the woman who survived. Lana stood in the doorway, holding her stuffed bear. "Mommy, I want to sleep with you tonight." I lifted her onto the bed. "Because you're scared?" She shook her head. "No, because I want you to sleep well." I laughed, for the first time without holding it in. A week later, the special hearing took place. Not loud like the first divorce proceeding. No swarm of reporters, no camera flashes, but the air was tighter, because this time it wasn't about separation, it was about truth. I entered the courtroom with Samuel and Lana. Dorian wasn't there. He was being held awaiting prosecution. Valerie appeared, thinner, lips trembling, eyes avoiding mine. No expensive perfume, no silk dress, no therapist demeanor. Only a gray inmate uniform and slim cuffs on her wrists. For a small second, she looked at me. No defiance, no disdain, just one thing. Recognition that the woman she thought would be buried was standing higher than her. The judge began. "Today, we review all accusations made against Mrs. Mara Ellison based on new evidence, new testimony, and serious legal violations." Samuel rose, his voice steady and resonant. "Your Honor, my client was not only deceived in marriage, but stripped of her dignity through a deliberate scheme constructed to portray her as an unstable mother. We do not ask for sympathy, we ask for restoration of reputation and an official declaration from the court." The judge nodded. Then it was my turn. I stood at the witness stand, eyes forward, head unbowed. "I am not a perfect mother," I began, "but I never abandoned my daughter, never harmed her, and never let her see the pain that others forced onto me." The room fell still. I continued. "I was made to believe I was small, useless, a failure, but my daughter, a child, showed me the truth about my worth." I turned to Lana, and I choose to believe it. Not everyone cried, but everyone inhaled. Valerie bowed her head, shoulders shaking. Samuel held up the USB. Your Honor, this recording demonstrates Valerie previously fabricated evidence and describes the plan to destroy Mrs. Ellison's family. The judge listened. The courtroom listened. No one spoke. No one shifted. When the recording ended, the judge said, "The court will issue a formal restoration of reputation for Mrs. Mara Ellison. The record will state that she was the victim of a deliberate conspiracy." I exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath for months without realizing it. Lana wrapped her arms around my waist. "I told you," she whispered, "you weren't bad." I placed my hand on her head, "And you proved it." After the special hearing, Lana and I stepped out of the courthouse into a Charleston morning with a light breeze and a sky so blue it looked freshly wiped clean. There were no crowds, no reporters chasing us, no microphones pushed toward my face. But one thing was unmistakably different. No one looked at me with suspicion anymore. An older woman passed by, a market basket in hand, paused for a second, then said quietly, "You did the right thing. Don't let anyone take your worth again." I nodded in thanks. No explanation needed, no defending myself. Her words felt like a key turning inside me, opening a door I thought had been sealed forever. Lana held my hand, her steps light as if she were walking on soft grass. "Mommy, people don't look at you the same anymore." I smiled. They see the truth now. We returned to the little apartment. I brewed chamomile tea, Lana sat coloring, and in the kitchen, a pot of chicken soup simmered gently, filling the home with warmth. No footsteps from a man, no cold voice cutting the air, no shadow looming over the dining table. I realized I had relearned how to breathe. Not fast, not guarded, not waiting for something to go wrong. At noon, my phone buzzed with a message from Samuel. "The reputation restoration has been officially approved, and there's another request you should review." I opened the attachment. It was a letter from the Charleston Women's Support Center, the print clear, the tone formal. "We would like to invite Mrs. Mara Ellison to speak at our upcoming community event to help women who have experienced isolation, manipulation, and psychological abuse find their voices again." I read it twice. Me, the woman who once believed she had no worth, now invited to help others reclaim theirs. Lana looked up at me. "Mommy, you're invited to talk like the heroes in my storybooks?" I laughed. "No, Mommy isn't a hero. Mommy is just someone who stood back up after being pushed down." Lana tilted her head, thinking, then said, "That means you are a hero." In the afternoon, we walked along the harbor. The water glimmered under the sunlight, white sails drifting slowly across the bay. The wind carried salt and the wooden scent of old boats. Lana hopped onto the stone ledge, arms out like a small bird.
Mommy, I want to learn piano. My friend at school gets to learn and I don't.
I remembered the times I asked Dorian about music lessons and heard, "Unnecessary, expensive, pointless." I stood up straighter. "You'll learn, I promise." Lana cheered, a sound that widened my chest in a way I'd never felt before. We walked past the old house, not to return, but to see it one last time. The mansion still stood, large, beautiful, perfect from the outside. But I saw what others didn't. Those walls had once been a cage. Lana looked up. "Mommy, are we ever going back there?" I shook my head. No. Because home isn't the place with the prettiest roof. Home is where we get to be ourselves. She gripped my hand tighter. That night, I opened my laptop to check email when a new notification appeared. Verification request for trust asset ownership. I froze. Samuel had mentioned the trust in Lana's name, but now the bank was contacting me officially. I opened the details. The management entity requested confirmation from the legal guardian to transfer administrative rights of the trust. I read every line, every clause, every note. No mention of Dorian, no pathway for him to reclaim anything, no hidden conditions, no legal traps. I sat still, a feeling spreading through me, not excitement, not relief, but restoration. Lana leaned her chin on my shoulder. "What's that, Mommy?" I placed my hand over hers. "It's your future." Lana smiled, then asked, "What does future mean?"
I thought for a moment. Future means you'll have opportunities someone else didn't want you to have.
She nodded slowly, the way someone saves a thought for later. When I tucked her into bed, she held my hand. Mommy, who do you want to be now? The question made me sit at the edge of the mattress. I once wanted to be a wife who was loved, a mother who was believed, a woman who wasn't looked down on. But now, I brushed her hair back and whispered, I want to be someone you can be proud of. Lana closed her eyes, her voice soft as breath. I already am. I sat beside her, watching her fall asleep, for the first time without curling into herself like she needed protection. I stood, walked into the living room, and opened the window. The wind drifted in, carrying the scent of the sea, and I realized something that had never existed before. I wasn't afraid of tomorrow anymore. Not because everything was fixed, not because the path was clear, but because for the first time, I was walking, not being dragged. A week later, I stood in front of the red brick building where the Charleston Women's Support Center was holding its community gathering. There was no grand stage, no television cameras, no one waiting to twist a headline. Just women walking in, slowly, quietly, clutching purse straps, their eyes reflecting the same expression I once saw in the mirror. Not weakness, but exhaustion from being strong for too long. Lana walked beside me, her hand in mine, asking nothing. She didn't need to understand. She simply felt, and she felt more clearly than anyone else. The program coordinator led us into a wide room with warm amber lighting and chairs arranged in a curved circle. Not the kind of setup where someone stands taller than the rest, but the kind where everyone can see one another. A silver-haired woman approached, her voice soft like worn cotton cloth. You must be Mara. We're grateful you came. You don't need to speak like a presenter, just speak like someone who has lived through it. I inhaled, deeply, as if my lungs were adjusting to a new kind of air. Lana sat in the front row, holding her small teddy bear. She smiled at me as if saying, You only have to be my mom. That's enough. When I stood, the room settled into silence. No cue, no signal, but everything paused, as though they had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. I began, not with thanks, not with an introduction. I said, I used to believe that if I stayed quiet, I would be loved. A woman in the middle row blinked rapidly, holding back a tear. I used to believe that if I endured, my family would stay whole. A pair of hands tightened around a wool scarf. I used to believe that I was the problem, that if I were better, softer, less emotional, everything would be fine. The entire room lowered their eyes, not in shame, but in recognition of words they had whispered to themselves and never dared say aloud. I looked down at my hands. But then my daughter recorded a video, not to expose her father, but to save me from the belief that I didn't deserve respect. A trembling breath rose from the corner of the room. I continued, I'm not here to tell a story about a bad man. I'm here to tell a story about a woman who made herself so small she nearly disappeared. Someone pressed a hand to her chest, as if to stop her heart from falling out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. I didn't need to sound powerful. I wasn't strong because I wanted to be. I was strong because I had no other choice. And I am here to say, we don't have to be strong alone anymore. A young woman broke into tears and covered her face. The silver-haired woman placed a hand on her shoulder. Lana looked at me with an expression I had never seen, the expression of a child witnessing her mother return to herself. After the session, many women stayed. Not to ask questions, not out of curiosity, but to say the sentences I once wished someone would say to me. I've never told anyone. I thought I was crazy. I thought it was only me. If you could do it, maybe I can too. One woman held my hand, her voice unsteady but firm. Thank you for saying out loud what we've been swallowing for years. I answered, it wasn't me. It was you. You showed up. When we stepped outside, the Charleston sun was sinking slowly, laying soft orange light across the street like a quiet flame. Lana squeezed my hand and asked, Mommy, why do people look at you so different now?
I thought a moment, then said, "Because this time, I'm not looking down." That night, I received an email from the organizers, not a thank you note, not a certificate, just a single sentence. "If you'd like, we would love to have you back." No pressure, no expectation, just a door gently opening. I turned off the lights and walked into Lana's room. She slept with her arms open, not curled in, not guarding herself, not clutching a pillow like a shield. I lay beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, and I realized I was no longer a sad story. I was no longer someone wounded. I was no longer the shadow in a beautiful but hollow house. I was someone who stepped into the light, not because someone rescued me, but because I chose to walk there. On a Sunday morning, while I was making breakfast, buttered toast and poached eggs, the dish Lana calls Mommy's food, I opened my inbox with no particular expectation. But then my eyes stopped on the subject line that made me sit down. Official invitation, Charleston Women's City Conference. I opened the message. The tone was formal, but not cold. "We witnessed your recent community talk and believe your story could empower hundreds of women seeking a way out of isolation and manipulation. We respectfully invite you to be the keynote speaker at this year's event." Keynote speaker, not an attendee, not someone standing along the wall, not someone hoping to be heard. Me, the woman once made to believe she had no voice. Lana looked up from the table, feet swinging. "Mommy, what happened?" I turned the laptop toward her. She read slowly, then her eyes widened. "That means a lot of people want to hear you talk." I smiled, but something deeper stirred in my chest, like a door opening not to a small room, but to a wide public square. That afternoon, I took Lana to her first piano lesson. The studio was small, with soft lighting and keys black and white like stories waiting to be told. Lana sat up straight, her little hands resting on the keys, and when the first sound rang out, imperfect, uneven, my eyes stung. Not because of music, but because freedom has a sound. After the lesson, the teacher said, "She has a natural sense of rhythm, but the most important thing, she's not afraid to make mistakes." I looked at Lana putting on her shoes, hair messy, cheeks flushed, not afraid to be wrong. A child only fears mistakes in a house where someone is always waiting to correct them. Now, that person is gone. That evening, I opened the conference invitation again and read the details. Date, 2 months away. Location, Charleston Convention Hall. Expected attendance, more than 600 people. I placed my hands on the keyboard to reply, but right then my phone vibrated. A message from Samuel. "You will accept, and I will help you prepare." Not a question, not a suggestion, but the certainty of someone who saw what I hadn't yet believed. I typed back, "I've never spoken in front of a large crowd." He replied almost instantly, "You've already spoken in front of something scarier, your own silence." I set the phone down and realized he was right. 2 weeks later, we had the first planning meeting. Samuel, Harper, the conference coordinator, and I sat around a long wooden table. No one mentioned fear. No one referenced failure. No one asked the question that once cut me open. Why did you let it happen? Instead, they asked, what is the most important thing you want other women to know? I thought, then I said, that they're not crazy just because they feel alone. Someone wrote it down. Someone nodded. Someone exhaled, like a truth they'd been waiting for had finally been spoken aloud. When the meeting ended, Harper walked with me to the door. She said quietly, "Do you know something? When I handed you that tissue that day, I never imagined you would be standing here." I looked at her, and when I took that tissue, I never imagined I could be standing here. We smiled, not the polite kind, but the kind shared by people who survived the same storm, even if from opposite shores. But that night, after I tucked Lana into bed and walked into the living room, there was an envelope lying at the door. No knock, no footsteps, no delivery notice, just a plain white envelope with no sender. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with one handwritten line. "This isn't over." No threat, no signature, no clue, but I recognized the handwriting.
Angular, slightly slanted, familiar. Dorian. I stood there for a moment, not shaking, not panicking, just still, like the surface of the water before the wind changes direction. I folded the note, not crumpling it, not tearing it, not clutching it. I placed it in a drawer and closed it. Lana called from her bedroom. "Mommy, are you still here?" I walked into her room and sat on the edge of her bed. "Mommy is always here." She wrapped her fingers around mine, eyes closed, peaceful, as if the world outside was only the sound of distant waves. I lay beside her, listening to the steady breath of a child who feels safe, and I understood. No letter, no past, no name could ever pull me back to the place I already walked out of. The day of the conference arrived faster than I expected. Charleston woke under a thin layer of mist, like an old lace veil someone forgot along the river. I made breakfast for Lana, small, heart-shaped pancakes she loves, then braided her hair, smoothing the strands as soft as the river wind. "Mommy is going to talk in front of lots of people, right?" she asked, eyes wide as if watching fireworks. I smiled, not overly confident, but no longer trembling. "Yes, and Mommy knows you'll be proud." She placed her hand on my cheek. "I'm already proud." Children say things softly, yet sometimes their words are the key that unlocks doors adults believe have rusted shut. That afternoon, I arrived at the Charleston Convention Hall. The parking lot was full, flags lined the walkway, and the sound of hundreds of footsteps echoed like the heartbeat of a city taking in a new breath. Samuel waited in the lobby, adjusting the microphone on my collar like he'd done it all his life. "Just breathe normally," he said. "Not because you need to be calm, but because you deserve to stand here." Harper handed me a bottle of water. "Nobody steps on this stage without ever shaking. If you shake, that means you're human." I nodded, but inside, I recognized something. I wasn't shaking out of fear. I was shaking because I was finally about to say something I should have said years ago. The doors beside the stage opened, and the room unfolded in front of me. More than 600 people. Soft lighting, not blinding, but enough to see every face. Older women, young mothers, women holding tissues like they'd learned to swallow feelings instead of speaking them. The host introduced me. "We welcome a woman who stepped from the shadow of manipulation into the light of freedom. A voice that reminded us silence is never proof of weakness." I walked out. No music. No roaring applause. Just a wave of quiet. The kind that comes from people waiting for what they need. I stood at the podium. The microphone hovered a small breath away. I didn't read a script. I didn't recount every painful detail. I simply said, "There were years when I believed that if I stayed quiet long enough, people would treat me kindly." A woman in the third row lowered her head. Someone in the back squeezed the hand beside her. I continued. I was called weak, useless, unfit to be a mother, but the reason I didn't collapse wasn't because I was strong. I paused, a natural retention beat, like inhaling before speaking a truth. But because my daughter looked at me with eyes that have never learned how to lie. There was a sharp breath, then whispers, then a sound like a string being tuned perfectly, tense but beautiful. I spoke of nights sitting beside Lana's bed, terrified of losing her. Of words sharpened like blades in the dark. Of the moment I realized I wasn't a failure. Only a woman living in a house designed to make her believe she was. Not complaining, not blaming. Just truth spoken in the voice of someone who once learned to whisper so she wouldn't upset anyone. When I finished, I said only one sentence. If anyone here has ever believed they were small, remember that even the smallest seed can break concrete if it decides to rise. The room stood. Not a handful, not politely. Everyone. The applause wasn't loud, it was deep, like the sound of hearts that had been bruised but never beaten. Samuel stood at the stage wing, his eyes slightly red. Harper smiled, the smile of someone witnessing a door open wider than the building itself. When the program ended, women lined up just to hug me. Not for autographs, not for photos, just to hold on. An elderly woman whispered, "I stayed silent for 42 years. Today, I think I might speak." A young woman said, "I thought it was only me." Another cried, "You said the words I needed to leave him." I didn't give advice. I only squeezed their hands, because I know some pain only needs to be seen to start healing. When we returned home, Charleston was lit in gold. The old streets reflected warm light across the river like memories untouched by harm. Lana sat on the sofa with the picture book, waiting as if I'd returned from a long voyage across the ocean. "Mommy, did you talk beautifully?" she asked. I held her close. I talked, and they listened. She smiled, drowsy. "So Mommy will never let anyone make you quiet again, right?" I brushed her soft hair. "No, Mommy will never be silent again." But just as I turned off the living room light, my phone vibrated. An email. No subject, no sender. Just one sentence. "You think you escaped, but the story has one last part." I stood still, not afraid, but alert. The way someone who's lived through storms recognizes that sometimes clear skies still hide the final rumble. And I understood. The final part isn't about the man who tried to frighten me. It isn't about the past. It's about the last step of a woman who truly steps into the light. 2 days after the conference, I received a call from Whitaker's office. The secretary's voice was gentle, like early morning wind. "Mrs. Mara, the final asset documents are ready. Mr. Whitaker would like you to come in and sign the official papers." There was no familiar trembling at the mention of paperwork, no feeling of being led into a courtroom like someone awaiting judgment. This time, I walked in as someone choosing her future. The office was on the 15th floor, looking out over the Charleston harbor glowing with sunlight. When I entered, Whitaker stood, not the stiff, polite kind of standing, but the kind reserved for someone he respected. "Congratulations, Mara. The assets are fully transferred. The compensation funds have been deposited into your new accounts. And regarding Dorian," he paused, "the charges are moving forward." I nodded, not in triumph, not in satisfaction, just in recognition that some endings don't need celebration, only closure. Then he handed me a small envelope with just one handwritten line on the front. "Not all men want women to be silent." I didn't need to ask who wrote it. I didn't need to open it there. Some truths don't need proof, only acknowledgement. I signed, and the signature no longer shook like someone begging to be believed. It was the signature of someone who gets to decide. That afternoon, I picked up Lana from school. She carried a stack of drawings, her eyes bright.
Mommy, I drew where we're going next.
I looked. It was a horizon where a red sun sank into the sea, and two figures stood holding hands on a wooden pier. "Where is this, Lana?" She answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world.
Hilton Head. My teacher said the ocean there sounds like whispering.
I laughed. I had promised myself I would take her somewhere the wind carries no one else's voice but our own. That evening, we had our first meal in our new home. Not large, but full of the breath of just the two of us. A small wooden table, a cream-colored cloth, and on the central chair, the place where Dorian once sat, the place that once made me shrink. Lana set the silverware there and said, "Mommy sits here." I stood still for a moment, not out of hesitation, but because I understood. The chair was never the symbol of the one who commands. It was the symbol of the one who is seen. I sat. Lana clapped like she was witnessing something sacred. We ate dinner. No one criticizing the seasoning, no one comparing, no one scrolling through their phone. Just the sound of spoons on plates and the small laughter of a child who knows she is loved. A week later, we traveled to Hilton Head. The sea was pale blue, the waves gentle, the sand fine as powder. I wore sandals, but Lana ran barefoot, leaving small footprints on the cool sand. The sun dipped lower. The sky shifted to soft orange and lavender. Lana built a small sandcastle, then looked at me. "Mommy, what will you do next?" I sat beside her, gazing at the horizon. "I will live," I said. Not poetic, not dramatic. "I will live without asking permission." She nodded, as if that was the only answer that ever existed. She handed me a small bucket. "Then we rebuild, but prettier. Nobody gets to knock it down anymore." The ocean breeze was so soft it felt like even time slowed down so we could enjoy it. As night settled in, I looked back at my journey.
not as someone who survived, but as someone returning from a place she never thought had an exit. I understood. I didn't lose because I was silent. I won because I am silent no longer. I didn't regain because I was strong. I regained because I stood up at the right moment. And more than anything, I didn't fail as a mother. I succeeded because I raised a little girl who knows what truth feels like. A breeze brushed past us. Lana looked up at me.
Mommy, you're smiling.
I answered, yes, because I know I've stepped out of the last row of my own life. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. And if this story touched you in any way, leave a comment and tell me which city you're watching from. Tap like if you believe no woman should ever be silenced. And subscribe so I have the strength to bring you more stories of healing, courage, and deep emotion. Thank you, truly. See you in the next story.